Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here in the Austrian Central Bank, the Österreichische Nationalbank. Dear Vice President Mora, dear distinguished guests, I see the former Governor Ewald Nowotny, I see the former Rector of the University of Vienna, Georg Winkler, I see the chair of the Finanzmarktaufsicht, Helmut Ettel, Robert Sterer from the WEW, and lots of other distinguished guests. I'm sorry for missing anybody. It's a great pleasure to have you here for this high-level meeting that is jointly organized by the Österreichische Nationalbank and the European Investment Bank. I want to thank right away for the long-standing cooperation between the OeNB and the EIB. It shares our commitment, our joint commitment to support evidence-based economic policy making and fostering sustainable growth, particularly in Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe. And against this backdrop, I'm very happy that Marek, dear Vice President, we are opening this meeting together today, and I will just say a few words before handing over to the Vice President. The title of today's meeting is CESEE, or Central, Eastern and Southeastern European countries at the turning point. And I think it's a very timely title for the afternoon. Why? In the last decades, the region has achieved impressive convergence, high levels of growth, a lot of foreign direct investments, and deeper integration into European manufacturing networks and value chain. However, in most recent years, the gains have slowed down and potential growth has remained subdued, while strong wage growth has increasingly eroded the cost competitiveness of some of the countries, not all of the countries. And this long-standing growth model that has relied strongly on FDI attraction is gradually, at least in some of these countries, fading and reaching, and that's the discussion of today, perhaps its limits and needs an addition with other and more timely growth stimuli. The external environment, and I think that's one of the reasons why we see at the moment this subdued growth, is also more volatile, more fragmented, and more uncertain. The European single market is, of course, still important for the entire region, but it remains fragmented, unfortunately, too fragmented, I would say. And, of course, whatever happens in the world in terms of the exposure to tariffs, in terms of geopolitical uncertainty, in terms of supply chain bottlenecks, all this, of course, is for countries like Austria or other countries in the region a challenge because of our economic structure, with many small companies, with companies that are deeply integrated in international markets, with very strongly export-oriented companies. I think it's very important at that turning point to discuss, as I said, the growth of the future. And I think the growth of the future lies in innovation, in strong capital markets, in more productivity, innovation-led productivity. And we see, of course, the change in all these economies, also in the Austrian economy, in that direction. And it will be decisive both for the growth outlook, but also, of course, for the development of our social networks, our system of a democratic and ecologically oriented growth economies. Firm-level evidence is crucial for understanding how companies react in this challenging environment. And the latest EIB Investment Survey for the region, which we'll learn more about very shortly, shows that the region remains very resilient, but investment is increasingly focused on replacement rather than expansion. And the gaps in intangible investments, they are persistent. So this is now, of course, the important aspects that are discussed in terms of productivity, and we'll see whether the boom in AI will help to regain higher productivity growth. We'll see to what extent the adoption and the development of AI models will be actually shared in terms of their economic wealth in the US and Europe or not. We'll see to what extent, of course, the regions are AI ready and prepared in organizational terms and in terms of management practices for what is going to come. We'll see to what extent the investments in human development, in human capital is preparing us for what is ahead of us. Today's program, and I'm coming back to today's program, in the first part, we'll present the EIB Investment Survey for the region and will be complemented by the Austrian perspective on direct investments, foreign direct investments, and there will be a very interesting panel discussion. I want to thank everybody who agreed to be on the program, the speakers, the members of the panel, and thank again the EIB and all involved on both sides, EIB and OeNB, for the preparation of this afternoon. Dear Marek, let me hand over to you, and I wish you a nice and stimulating afternoon. Thank you.
Dear Governor Kocher, dear Governor Novotny, lieber Ewald, dear Professor Winkler, esteemed colleagues and guests, good afternoon and welcome. It is a pleasure to address such a distinguished audience here in Vienna on behalf of the European Investment Bank. Thank you all for being with us today. The EIB's role is at the same time straightforward and demanding. We support Europe's priorities at scale and with impact. The strategic investment priorities of Central Eastern and Southeastern European countries are fully in line with this strategic approach of the EU. The focus is on energy transition, climate adaptation and mitigation investments, on defense and security, and on technological transition, and on social infrastructure and cohesion policy. Today's conference focuses on how Central, Eastern and Southeastern European countries navigate the changes, especially those related to A, trade and geopolitical disruptions, and B, the artificial intelligence transformation, both as a driver of competitiveness and resilience. The discussion today is about building on this momentum, securing supply chains, strengthening the single market, unlocking private investment at scale, and ensuring that talent, skills, and innovation can translate into sustained AI-driven growth. Where does the EIB, the European Investment Bank, come into the picture? First and foremost, as a catalyzer for large investments in all of these priority areas. In 2025, the European Investment Bank Group, comprising the bank itself, the European Investment Bank, and the European Investment Fund, signed 100 billion euro in new financing and advisory services for over 870 high-impact projects across the EU and outside the EU, including in Ukraine and the candidate countries in the Western Balkans. These will lead to investments which support growth, competitiveness and cohesion across Europe. The Central Eastern and Southeastern European region, including EU member states in this region, received a large chunk of EIB financing. In 2025, the EIB group provided over 15.9, meaning almost 16 billion euro in financing to Central Eastern, Southeastern European economies, which is a non-negligible part. It was 0.7% of their GDP. 90% of these funds have been allocated to priority investments in the areas I have mentioned. Our support is steady. This year, we provide around 3.5 billion euro to the region already in the first quarter of 2026. These figures show that digitalization and technological innovation are now central to Europeans' competitiveness. In 2025 alone, the EIB Group invested 22.4 billion euro under this priority, under digitalization and technological innovation, 22.4 billion. and a further 2 billion in artificial intelligence. These investments reflect a clear objective: to strengthen Europe's economic resilience and competitiveness by leveraging artificial intelligence and advanced technologies while reinforcing Europe's strategic autonomy. But we are also clear-eyed about the possible difficulties ahead. Digitalization and artificial intelligence are driving productivity gains across Europe. According to our analysis, AI adoption has already accounted for more than 10% of total productivity growth in the EU since 2019. However, the long-term picture is more complex. AI, artificial intelligence, risk deepening strategic dependencies in an increasingly polarized global environment. And the expansion of generative AI will significantly increase investment needs, not only in innovation, but also in data infrastructure and energy. Let me give you some examples. Data centers located in Dublin are projected to consume almost 1/3 of the national electricity in Ireland by 2026. Data centers in Amsterdam consume 4.6% of the Netherlands' total electricity consumption in 2024. Data centers in Copenhagen are expected to reach 15 to 18% of national electricity demand by 2030. The scale of the challenge is clear. While Europe accounts for around 17% of global GDP, only 4 of the world's top 50 technology firms are European. And the geopolitical context makes these investments even more urgent. The United States and China are investing at speed and at scale in strategic industries. If Europe does not match their ambition, we risk falling behind in sectors that will define future prosperity and security. While this issue is European, its implications are very real at national level. Central Eastern and Southeastern Europe has a strong foundation, highly skilled engineers, a dynamic startup community, and internationally competitive firms in IT and digital services. At the same time, AI adoption among Central Eastern and Southeastern European firms still lags behind the EU average. This points not to a lack of capability, but to untapped potential. The EIB Group is determined to help regional gaps. We are the main implementing partner of the EU InvestEU program, which de-risks investment to support innovation, growth, and job creation across Europe. Building on this, we launched TechEU as our flagship initiative for technology and innovation. Through what we call TechEU, we aim to provide 70 billion euro in financing by 2027. We support high-risk, high-impact projects across clean tech, digital tech, health tech, defense and space, as well as fundamental research. A key element of this decision is the expansion of the European Tech Champions initiative. This initiative is already the largest fund of funds in Europe, fully dedicated to helping innovative European companies scale and compete globally. It has invested in 14 mega funds of more than 1 billion euro each and has helped anchor the creation of 11 European unicorns. Building on this success, the EIB Group will launch a dedicated European Tech Championships initiative platform in the second quarter of this year, allowing institutional investors such as pension funds, insurance companies, banks, asset managers, and national promotional banks or national promotional institutions to participate alongside public resources. This European Tech Championship initiative, what we call 2.0, aims to mobilize 4 times more capital than the first generation of this initiative. It will be a decisive step in narrowing Europe's scale-up financing gap and strengthening our strategic autonomy in key sectors. Let me conclude. The choice we make today will shape Europe's place in the world and also Europe's technological position for decades to come. By harnessing European innovation and artificial intelligence, we can build a stronger, more resilient and more competitive Europe, one that remains firmly in control of its future. I look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you very much.
I'm trying. Okay, very good. Okay, thank you so much for being here. So as announced, we are trying to speak about the two hot topics, so the trade disruptions and artificial intelligence. So this will be the fil rouge of the day. And with a focus of Central Eastern European economies, which are, let's say, put together in this view, but of course we know that there are large differences among the countries. We take first point of view from European view, let's say, because we look at the investments. In general, investments has been resilient, so we didn't see any collapse. But on the other side, they were not growing as much as in other areas. We will see very soon. And the contribution of public investments was strong, and it's time now to ask for additional private investments. And that's what we are working on. And then, of course, we will discuss also the EU model that is having some strengths and some weaknesses, especially in the technologies. But as we say in EIB, when there is a problem, we sit down and we try to fill the gap and work on it. So that's why all these analyses are also helping to identify the gaps and to find solutions at EU level, European level. So here, these are the two reports that are, let's say, that I'm using. I'm using the analysis of the two reports for this presentation. I don't know how you can take the two QR code in one shot. I think it's impossible, but I will show you again later. So maybe one solution is now to take only one. The big report is very much having a European perspective. And a lot of analysis on the different topics, is mainly by topic. On the other side is the Central Eastern European view, in which you see each country how is positioned in the region. And thank you again for the Austrian National Bank to have such a strong focus on the region, and especially the capabilities of the colleagues we've been working together with many years now. So these are the two different things, and you will find these QR codes also at the end, and you will receive the presentations, I'm pretty sure. So let's have a broad look, very broad look. Investments in Europe, as I said, they've been resilient but stalling. You see that they are rather stable in the last couple of years. And look at the red part. The red part is government. So we have been pushed, these investments have been pushed a lot by the government part, and the private, especially the corporate part, has been relatively weak. So in this sense, the public sector was helping the entire economy. This is entire Europe, and this is a comparison with the US. You know the debate with the US is the red line, you see how it was growing. We could see a similar picture with the GDP. Here we are focusing on investments, and the yellow one is investments excluding ECT. So the booming tech sector, we would see that investments in the US would be a little bit more flat, but still you see that a gap was quite visible in the last, let's say, 5-6 years after COVID. We've seen a really different patterns. So it's time probably to change this trend. And here you see another view, the same as before, but the shorter time after COVID, and comparing Central Eastern Europe. So Central and Southeastern Europe, the trend is better, but still not so fantastic as in some years of the US. But you see that is always the most dynamic area in terms of GDP growth, in terms of income growth, in terms of many other things, and including investments. So the picture is quite clear, I think. Strong position of the US, even excluding the tech sector. Central Eastern Europe and average of Europe. Of course, Central Eastern Europe here is included in the average of Europe, so there is also some effect there. And then just a consideration here could be a little bit maybe complex, but if you look at the chart on the left, we were trying to map the financial markets. Now, financial markets now are seen as a bit of the right voice to interpret the economic trends. And actually, it seems that they're reacting much more to the positive news rather than to the negative news. And I would say that, that year-to-date markets are still positive, and even positive comparing with the end of February since the start of the war. So each of us can have their interpretation. For sure, corporate profitability in the US is very strong. There is AI booming. But it seems sometimes that markets are neglecting the geopolitical environment that is very tough. On the other side, we have been doing these experiments, so that's why I wanted to use this. We were asking to the companies in our survey how they would behave in terms of a higher shock on cost of external finance. Is the blue one, and you see the drop in investments they would do. And in terms of geopolitical risk, so the red line. So for higher shock, bad news, companies are reacting quite negatively. So they are always reacting negatively. While on the positive shock, we were asking if there is a sort of taco, so Trump announcing a reduction of tariffs, you see that the companies were not reacting so much as on the negative side. So we see this disconnection among the two sides at the moment. If you ask me if I have the solution of this, no, it's more a puzzle sometimes. But it's important to keep this into account because investments are not so much booming as or growing as financial markets. So I think that's a relevant point. One more point. We know, and I was not showing the data, that there are some fiscal constraints in Europe in general and in Central Eastern Europe as well. We have 3 countries with negative outlook for Fitch, for instance, Romania, Hungary, and Poland. And the fiscal space is a bit less than before. Of course, there are a lot of expenses in defense and so on. But if we look at the EU budget, probably the solution has been the EU budget in the last years. What we have seen is strong growth in investments supported by the public sector. But you see that there is a strong point, a strong role here of the recovery and resilience facility. You remember it started, I think, in 2020 or 2021, and is going to expire at the end of this year. And you see this drop in this increase in the recovery and resilience facility is compensating the relatively stability of EU budget. EU budget, maybe you are not aware, but is 1% of European GDP. So I think you are all familiar with the fact that none of us they see in our tax payments any tax to EU, right? I hope there are no exceptions here. Maybe those working for EU institutions, there is is somebody paying taxes for you? Okay, you and me. But let's say apart from these people, normally you pay the taxes to your country. So it means that it's mainly, we call it sometimes a fee to the state. So the budget is not growing. EU is cannot go to deficit. And also bonds emissions are very limited that are mainly related with the recovery and resilience facility. So we will not find the solution here unless there is a lot of leverage of resources. This is what we are trying to do. So with some, for instance, guarantees, instruments like guarantees, EIB is entering lending and is mobilizing much more than the amount it is lending to, I don't know, for instance, sometimes EIB is lending 20% or 30% or 50%. This means that there is a lot of leverage and we are mobilizing a lot of much more lending. But the resources are rather limited. You see the peaks are in the global financial crisis. You see no peak. In the debt crisis, you see another peak, and COVID times another peak. But the EU budget is flexible, but not so much as for the states. So 1% should be compared with the states. They have easily 40, 45, 47. How much is Austria? Around 47 maybe percent, something like that. Oh, no, maybe 40% of budget can be spent by the state or GDP, and this would support the Austrian economy. In EU budget is less than 1% with a big role of agriculture there. This is just for you because EIB, for instance, is playing a role also outside you. So let's move just to the trade disruption. Here, my colleagues are sometimes a bit desperate in interpreting the situation, and especially to fix the right moment between the various, or among the various taco moments. So when Trump is changing, the Trump administration is changing his ideas. I have just one slide, and especially one is about the obstacles. I hope you see the gray bar that is for US companies. So we are mapping here EU companies, Central Eastern European companies, and US companies. So the US companies, in terms of obstacles, it seems they are suffering quite a lot, this variability. That's first point. Second point, the Central Eastern European companies, they seems less affected than the Western European companies. Why is that? Very often because they see this indirectly. So they're very exposed to trade, much more than Western companies, but they're exposed intra-EU. So that's a very important question. So typical example could be that Czech Republic is not exporting so much directly in the USA, but indirectly via Germany, Austria, and other countries. Sometimes this is happening in some sectors. In other sectors could be different, but overall this is the picture. So, and this is the obstacles. But if we ask about the actions, you see that the US companies, they had to take very sharp actions and reduce the share of imports. So the topic we were very worried at the beginning about export is now turning into import. So the supply chains are really sometimes under pressure, especially in the US. You see that EU and Central Eastern European companies, only 10% had to reduce the imports. And if we look at diversifying and increasing the number of countries, that's a similar picture in which Europe is better placed than US companies. Is it a good news, bad news? Well, there is some instability overall, also in Europe, in Central Eastern Europe, but better than the US companies. Then let's move a bit more on the artificial intelligence part. Let's start from innovation. So we asked to the companies, and here you see all the countries. We asked to the companies if they are investing in innovative activities. And then we also ask other questions, and then we ask if this innovation is new to the firm, is new to the market, or to the entire world. Well, you see that the gray bar is no innovation. So mainly, these are companies that are replacing their capacity. But the big innovation is on the green side. So the US, Lithuania, Latvia, Slovenia, Poland, Bulgaria are the top performers in this. And you see the variability among the countries in Central Eastern Europe is quite high. So that's quite relevant because you may see that the innovation overall is similar to EU on average. So that's a good news. But you may see big differences across the countries. On the sector, well, of course, there is a sector composition that is influencing, like Croatia may be more exposed to tourism, for instance. Hungary had a weaker economic path in recent years. Then, moving to artificial intelligence, this was the question attracting more interest from our survey and was widely discussed. This is the usage of artificial intelligence. So you see that Europe is at par as the US. Unfortunately, it's only the usage. Is not the development. Sometimes, maybe it's not the same comparison, but driving a car, using a car, and producing a car is something very different. Maybe it's not so much here with artificial intelligence, because using means that there is a lot of innovation, you can produce a lot of things, but still, it's very different usage versus development of models. Well, good news, EU is at par with the US in terms of usage already. Why? Because it was ramping up very quickly in the last 2 years, but Central Eastern Europe is lower. There is some negative news also for Europe, that in the US, you see that artificial intelligence is used more broadly in the different functions. You see the gray bar is higher for customer service, internal processes, marketing and sales, and human resources. So it seems that in Europe, we are using just for a few functions, more limited ones, and not so much as in the US. So there is a lot of catching up there possible. So each time there is a gap, of course, there are also opportunities to invest more in those fields. Again, I was showing what the information I was passing to my vice president because I was insisting on this, because artificial intelligence is also creating a lot of opportunities, but also some challenges that should be faced immediately. So you see the data that were mentioned before. The data centers are consuming a huge amount of energy, and there are already some restrictions with the grids in some countries, especially in those where artificial intelligence is developing very fast. Dublin. No, this is a mistake. So it was Dublin. Dublin is consuming 32% of Irish energy already, Amsterdam almost 5%, and Copenhagen 1/6. So huge amount of energy is spent on artificial intelligence. This tells you how important is also for Europe the energy transition, the green transition. So that's very, very relevant. Last point, last slide, innovation. Again, connected with artificial intelligence. Unfortunately, the red line is US. Is San Francisco. This is the Bay. You may see that in the first 4 years, funding coming to startups is exactly the same in Europe and in the San Francisco Bay, not in the US, in the San Francisco Bay. So Europe is incredibly good in the first phase. It is good in producing ideas, good universities, good patenting ability. So Europe starts with a very good foot at the beginning of this process. But then there is a funding gap that is opening in the following years. So this is a scale-up gap, we call it. So when the company is scaling up, this means that there is a funding gap. This is a paradox if we think there is an excess of financing in Europe. We have a lot of what is called lazy money in our deposits. We are very prudent, while the US is really very bold in allocating the deposits to very risky activities, equity, and so on. And you see that the gap is there. And this gap, this should be our aim, to close this gap as much as possible in the future, and this will help our companies to scale up. You see the other side of the medal, that in San Francisco, 86% of investors are US investors. In Europe, only 18% of investors in Europe are Europeans. This we know, but I think that is really amazing to see this. And you see even London, that is a very important place, it's very much financed by the US capital. Of course, as I said, we identified this gap. We know that there is a lot to do. And in this sense, we are working on it with the Tech Champions Initiative for the EIB, and especially we are focusing not only on the startups, but on the scale-up. So after the companies are growing more than $500 million, for instance, this is the problem of Europe and where we are trying to intervene. So overall, you see again, as promised, you can take the QR code. So the point here is, do you see this as positive or negative? So what we can say, we identified a lot of positive strengths in Europe. We know the social model. We know how resilient were the supply chains. On the other side, we know that there is a gap with technology and artificial intelligence. And for instance, many institutions are working on that. And this gap is more evident for Central Eastern Europe. So we can see this as the glass is half full or half empty. Actually, I was learning the solution, not from economists, but from sommeliers. So the glass is always refillable, and we can work on it. So that's the point, very important point, that any gap, we should work on it. And the Central Eastern European, we know that the region is very dynamic, has been having 20 fantastic years in the past in terms of economic performance. So there is a lot of, let's say, potential from the region. So Julia is for you now, and I'm pretty sure you will talk about foreign direct investment. That is a very important component of these financing gaps we've been talking until now. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Matteo, for, I think it's a very hard start for me now after these breathtaking figures and so far-reaching thoughts. I will now just explain to you the most recent developments of Austrian FDI in the CESEE region, maybe refocus a little bit on the region that we will focus on then in the high-level panel discussion. And so I will present some of the like constancies, but also of the changes that we see in Austrian FDI figures. And I would like to thank the good support from my colleagues from External Statistics Division, Kritim Avdiu and also Leila Avdovic, and also my own colleagues for preparing this short presentation to you, which will be mainly descriptive. In a nutshell, so what will I show you? I will show you some figures that tell us that I mean, this is sort of very old wisdom. We all know that one of the first movers in terms of private investment in the Central Eastern and Southeastern European countries after the start of the transition were Austrian firms. This was good for the Austrian firms. It was also good for the region, I would like to say. So the investors played an important role in the catching up phase, but also, as you will see later on, it still pays off for Austrian firms to have moved into these markets early on. This strong engagement of the Austrian companies continues, especially in the financial sector. It's still the dominant sector where our investment is, but we do see some signs of diversification. This is probably one of the areas that would be interesting to discuss. Do we see the right forms and the right quantity of diversification here? Yeah, I will just present the figures now for the time being. As I said, this first move and strong move into Central Eastern, Southeastern Europe has paid off also for Austrian investors. The profitability in the region is notably higher than in other Austrian outward investments. On average, it's for the region above 10% return on investment, which is higher than the general average of Austrian outward investment that is around 8%, and often it's also higher than the market return on investment. So Austrian investors seem to have had a good pick there in many cases. This attractiveness of the region for FDI in general, not only for Austrian investors, but more generally, built upon a couple of factors that were really unique to the region. Strong economic growth that prevails. We still have a significantly positive growth differential in this region. Competitive production costs, that is a factor where we at the Austrian Central Bank are a little bit concerned that this is being eroded now rather rapidly by strongly rising wage costs and other things. Of course, the geographical position close to the large consumer markets in Western Europe remains. The well-developed infrastructure was also a plus and continues to be a plus. And then some countries also offer very attractive tax conditions. What is, I think, interesting to note is that despite its small economic size, Austria is often the #1 investor in those countries. So it's not only important for us, but also we are sometimes important for the countries in the region. And a factor that is maybe not so much noticed yet, but which is, I think, very much worth mentioning is that these countries have themselves become active investors. And we see some very dynamic intra-regional FDI in the region, which is gaining momentum and which is also often determined by geographic proximity, but also by shared cultural and economic ties. So let me now walk you a little bit into those figures. You see here the sand-colored line, which is the Austrian investment in all countries apart from Central and Eastern Europe, and the blue line is the investment in Central and Eastern Europe. This is FDI outward stocks. And you see that while it's still a very constant investment and engagement in the region from the Austrian side, in terms of shares, this has declined. So in 2007, 45% of the Austrian investment was in the region, while now this share is down to 37%. However, overall, the share remains, the region remains dominant in Austrian outward investment. So since 2007, the dynamics in these investments are driven more by FDI into other countries, predominantly into other European countries. Asia has become also more important as a destination for Austrian FDI a bit later, since 2014, but the stocks there remain still considerably smaller than in other regions. And since 2019, the growth dynamics are predominantly driven. Here I'm talking really only about the growth, the recent growth, is driven more by US and Canada. So this would be really interesting to know what are the reasons behind that. And in fact, actually my original plan was to be here today and present you already first results from a project that we have that looks exactly at the effects of Trump tariffs on Austrian FDI. Unfortunately, it turns out that already constructing this tariff variable in the right way so that we can correspond it with firms' decision at the firm level is a bit of a tricky task. So we have solved this issue, but not yet arrived at some results that I can share, but I'm happy to share, hopefully, at another occasion soon. The share of FDI into the Central Eastern and Southeastern European region has been at the low in 2016 of 32%, but has increased again a little bit more recently. And I think it should also be noted that of this FDI into Central Eastern, Southeastern Europe, 3/4 go into EU members in the region. So the importance of the EU single market, I think, is very nicely reflected here, among others. The Western Balkans and other CESEE countries receive quantitatively less FDI, but we have seen also some increases in the shares there, especially in North Macedonia recently. And it's worth investing there. The profitability of Austrian investments in the region is high and remains high. So the region is traditionally characterized by high profitability. For Austrian FDI, this is, as I said, 10% on average. This has been dented a little bit during the global financial crisis, where this profitability was a bit lower, but only for 2008 and 2009. And already in 2010, we could see that returns on investment recovered in the region again. Particularly high profits are generated by Austrian firms in Czechia, Slovakia. There is way more volatility in the non-EU countries, in the Western Balkans and others. Let me turn briefly to the sectoral composition of Austrian outward FDI stock. As you can see here, we first wanted to put this on a logarithmic scale so you can see also the other sectors. But I think it's more impressive to note that most of the FDI is in the financial sector, which is this here, this big share. But please note, and this is something that would have been hidden if we had put this on a logarithmic scale, that also this dominant sector, its share has declined from 52% in 2013 down to 37% most recently. This is not a special feature of Austrian FDI in the region, but this is more of a general trend. Still, the financial sector accounted for about half of all inward FDI in the region between 2005 and 2012. And since then, this share has been going down a little bit. I think this sector, the financial sector, reflects in an exemplary way the rapid transition towards market economies of these countries, a process which has come to completion now successfully. Already by 2007, 80% of financial institutions in the region have been privatized, and most of them owned actually by foreign investors. In the euro area, about 15% of financial institutions were foreign owned in the same year, which reflects a much stronger home bias in Western Europe compared to Eastern Europe, that shows in this respect way more integration, financial integration. And Austria, and this is notable given the small size of Austria, is among the top 3 investors in this sector next to Germany and the Netherlands. And the second most important sector is retail and wholesale trade with a robust share of 9%. You see also a strong increase in some of the sectors I mentioned. For instance, and here these are where these small circles come now. The strongest increases are to the left in agriculture and automotives. I apologize, there is a alphabetical ordering of the sectors, not an industrial logic behind that. But agriculture and automotives, the shares have increased by 7 percentage points and 5 percentage points respectively, but also real estate, the second most important sector for Austrian FDI, has shown increases of 3 percentage points, as has paper and wood. And let me now finally I will skip this for the sake of time. This is showing, but I think it's a bit too small now coming out here on the screen. It is showing that Austria is #1 investor in many of those countries. You will get the slides later on, and then you can verify that very often for Austria. This is for the years 23 and 2024. We have a little 1 there, meaning that we are the most important investor in those countries, particularly so in southeastern or southeastern economies like Slovenia, Croatia, and North Macedonia. What is also interesting is that Austria is often more important in these countries than Germany. So very often our rank here is, so we are more important than Germany. And now bear with me for the last piece of factual information, or for the last figures, which are represented, I think, in a highly attractive way here. This globe, or this circle here, represents FDI flows from the countries that are listed here around to other countries. And we have here, and that's what I want to illustrate with this, is that this is not the Austrian data anymore. This is data from the Vienna Institute. Thank you for providing excellent FDI statistics. That we have really a strong regional integration, and within these regional FDI flows, we see a few clusters. For instance, we see the Baltics, which are in orange, where we see strong flows between Lithuania and Latvia, between all of Estonia and both of these. So we see sort of rather close cluster here. In the Baltics, we see also an important cluster in Central Eastern Europe with strong flows between neighbors such as Czechia and Slovakia, but also Poland and Czechia, and also Hungary. Hungary is interesting because we see very strong flows also into the southern neighbors, Croatia. Sorry, I can't see it myself now, but I think it's Bulgaria and Romania here. So we see also the Western Balkans, where we have to date still rather little outward FDI flows, but strong inflows also from other CESEE countries, such as, for instance, here it's, Slovenia, yeah. Slovenia down to Slovenia, Croatia, we have mutual strong FDI flows, but also to other southeastern European economies. So I think this was a snapshot of like how do the macro figures look like, compiled on the one hand by the Austrian Balance of Payments and on the other hand by the Vienna Institute. And I'm very much looking forward now to a very interesting and applied discussion where we get much more insights what's behind this data that I have presented to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear distinguished guests. I would like to welcome you here for the panel discussion titled Where to Invest in Times of Digitalization, Artificial Intelligence and Trade Disruption. My name is Zuzana Kaparova. I'm the head of EIB Group Office in Slovakia, and I'm really happy to be here and to have the distinguished panelists with us today. I would like to welcome them on the stage and briefly introduce them. Let's start in an alphabetical order, and I would like to welcome Mr. Kvitim Dobruna, who is the founder and senior partner at Ekis company with extensive experience in foreign direct investment, startups, and the investment landscape in the Western Balkan. Please join us, Mr. Dobruna. I would like to welcome also Marek Mora, Vice President of the European Investment Bank Group, who is going to provide the institutional and European perspective on today's economic and geopolitical challenges. Please welcome. We have also Maurizio Poletto with us, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Platform Officer at Erste Group, who is going to offer valuable insights into how artificial intelligence and digital transformation are reshaping banking in our region. Welcome, Mr. Poletto. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Mr. Pavel Prepiak, Executive Vice President of the Automotive Industry Association of the Slovak Republic, who will share perspectives and challenges and transformation of one of the key industries in the region. Thank you very much and welcome. I will join you by the table. Thank you very much and welcome again. We are meeting at the time of profound transformation. The Central Eastern and Southeastern European region stands at the crossroad, at the junction between a successful catch-up phase and a new era driven by innovation, digitalization, and resilience to global shocks. Digital technologies, AI, increasing geopolitical and trade disruptions are fundamentally reshaping the environment in which business, institutions, and economies operate. I'm therefore very happy that we have somebody from the different sectors with us today. And the key question, I think, is no longer whether to invest in transformation, but where and how to invest in order to ensure competitiveness and sustainable growth. Today, we will explore these questions together, from mobilizing private investments, financing innovation, to the impact of AI and banking and industry, and the implications of global trade disruptions for our region. Before we begin, I would also very much encourage you the audience, to actively participate during the panel discussions. You will have the opportunity to ask the questions, so please feel free to join this opportunity. And with that in place, I would start with the first round of questions, and I would also like to give the floor to our panelists somehow during the first question to introduce briefly the institution, company they are coming from, the perspectives. You can tell us a bit more about yourselves, which I didn't mention during my opening speech. I would like to start with Mr. Poletto, if I may, Chief Operating Officer from the Erste Group based. Mr. Poletto, it's really a pleasure to have you here to discuss financing conditions and also the availability of finances for innovative companies. But I'm also very glad to have you here as the executive responsible for the technology at Erste Group, which is one of the largest groups in the region, with subsidiaries also across many countries of the region. So how is artificial intelligence transforming Erste Group's operations, from risk management to the overall customer experience?
Well, first, thank you for inviting me. Well, artificial intelligence started with a huge injection of enthusiasm on all of us. I have experienced a lot of new technology. I've experienced the internet and then the mobile phone apps into around 2010, a bit earlier. And then there was this, you remember these blockchain things about 5 years ago? Lots of enthusiasm. And what we saw in AI is that it was something that it was very easy to relate to. Each of us could try in the board. So each of us on the executive level of the organization could try this right away and feel in our hands the disruptive power of this technology. So, huge excitement. Now, the excitement is still there, but now we are dealing with the complexity of implementing that excitement, regulatory requirement in order to be able to make it safe and compliant, discussion about what do we do ourselves, what do we do with someone else, all the debate around how much we can do ourselves, how much we need to take resources from third party, which are probably better positioned than us to deliver models, for instance. And not lastly, the main challenge of how do we empower our employees to use it? First comes the employees, then comes the consumer. So we have jumped into this technology, just to give you a sense of practicality, we jumped into this technology about 2.5 years ago. We had a very simple strategy at that time, almost trivial, which is for productivity within the organization, every country should do as much as possible, as quick as possible. So we didn't want to intervene centrally. So we said, guys, don't do it as quick as possible, but specifically for internal productivity. And most of the countries, this was being very supportive in a sense that we have tools and chatbots for employees and working instruction and policy understanding, everything you can imagine that works very well. Lots of quantity, but also lots of quality. For customer-facing stuff, the strategy was also brutally simple. You don't touch it, we do it centrally. Because we wanted to avoid that we are doing mistake. Our fear, and my fear is still, many of our consumer and our customers have been experienced kind of chatbot-style interaction over the last 10 years, most of them bad. All of you have been through some chatbot, either through some weird eyeline or whatever, and then you get into this mode that says, sorry, I don't understand what you need, repeat again, or says, I'm not able to help you out. All of you probably will try it, I think you're all early adapter, tried Alexa and Siri, one was 6 years ago. And probably many of you, like me, use it for get some jokes, open the light, and get some music play, and then you stop there. And so I think we have a fantastic chance in our industry to do it right. But if the first thing I put out is, it's not really working, people will say, yeah, it's bad as before, so give up again. And I think we don't have many times. So we said the customer-facing part, we tried to centralize it. And with it, we started to build the first AI platform. And guess what? After about a year we did that, we are already working on the next version of it. And when I mean next version, I don't mean an iterative. I mean we throw everything we've done away and we do it again. Because that's what this technology is about. And when I started, agentic was not there. Now agentic is the thing. So everyone knows now that we need to do it in a different way. So as you hear from my words, super enthusiasm. It's a new world. We just go in with the fantastic sense of urgency. It's great. And I'm not ruling out that in 1 year right now I would sit in a similar panel and say, we are doing for the third time. Could well be.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Let's get touch upon the second issue, the second topic. And Mr. Prepiak, it's going to be a question for you, not easy, definitely, but like the question is somehow simple. Which is the impact of trade disruptions on the automotive sector? Because you are coming from Slovakia, a country which is really dependent on automotive industry. So how is it affecting Slovakia, but also the region and potentially globally? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Let at the beginning, thank you for invitation and some few words about myself. Maybe in this room I am only one which has no economical background, neither, let's say, a legal background or something. My background is completely different. I am the machinery engineer, which was, let's say, study and start working for the car industry to produce car. Yeah. Now I am on the little bit a different position because I can let's say, summarize my experiences in the last 35 years. mostly in the part which is not directly the production, but is the distribution and how we sell the car, how we find the customers. Let's start with the simple things. We produce the product which is one of the most expensive product for real customer. That means there is not exclusively produced for something. It's a car, something like a refrigerator, something like a clothes, anything we use from time to time to change. This product, car, is most affected by global cooperation. If you like it or not like it, word like made the European vehicles last 30 years disappear, never ever exist more. What we produce, it's a combination between the European part of suppliers and non-European suppliers. Without non-European suppliers, we simply can build the cars which was early in the 90s, but not the cars which we need according to the regulation right now. In Slovakia, let's call it, we are the one of the most, let's say, we are the country which is most influenced to the car industry. Maybe from the figures, we are producing more than 1 million cars per year. We have currently 4 assembly plants. Within the maybe 1.5 years, they will be last one in the eastern Slovakia, in the Volvo Group. And roughly 12% of our GDP is linked to the car industry. From this share, more than half, it's a supplier. A little bit less than 50% is the final assembly plants. The question at the beginning was very nice and very simple, but what I have to say as an answer is not very easy. We can, let's say, discuss, it's our region vulnerable? Are we really resilient for all this impact? Currently, I have to say that this is the pretty good question, which has many aspects which we can consider on. But first of all, what means the resilience? It's our ability to produce product from domestic sources. We see in the last 5 years many influences. We have the crisis with chips. We have a crisis with many other suppliers. We stopped the production in Europe for many months. We were not able to finish cars. Or is this resilience the ability to always be attractive region for investors and make the, let's say, favorable condition for investor? This is the question also for us. Needless to say, at the end of this, my, let's say, introduction speech, is that Slovakia is producing many cars, but we don't have, let's say, something like, we can call it domestic, local producer. We have Volkswagen in Bratislava, it's a from Germany brand. We have a Kia in Žilina, which is Korean brand. We have PSA Group, which is French brand. We have Jaguar Land Rover assembly plants, which is UK and partly India-based brand. And now we will finish soon later the assembly plants with many supplier change in the eastern Slovakia for Volvo Group. As you maybe know, maybe not, 78% of Volvo is owned by Chinese companies. So from this point of view, we have quite a really tough period. And how the overcapacity in Europe, which maybe will be then, I will present some figures. This overcapacity in Europe, it's open the question which assembly plant and which supplier will remain running the business for the car industry, which has to move in the different industry. Now we see the possibility in Europe that the, let's say, defense industry, it's on the picture. There is money inside. And this is everything which we try to consider on. And we are really, as we can say, we are really in the very heavy transition period.
Thank you very much. Let's use the opportunity, Mr. De Bruna, that you are focusing also on a region which is not yet part of the EU, but you are working in EU, like in a countries willing to access EU one day. We have heard things from the CEE region. What is the perspective from Western Balkans and EU and candidate countries? Is it possible that Western Balkan will be able to follow the trajectory of the CEE region countries, meaning like converging institutionally, enter EU, enter a common market, have access to it? Is this trajectory already set in stone, or do you see risks that the success of CEE region countries may not be repeated, especially in these times?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I would like to start with a comparison to help put things into perspective. Both regions, Central and Eastern and Southeastern Europe and the Western Balkans went through a very difficult period of transition and of transformation, be it in terms of moving from centrally planned towards market-led economies, from authoritarian rule to democracy, or from monism to pluralism, and that has, of course, left its mark. But in terms of the Western Balkans, the path was actually much more difficult because we had a decade of wars, destruction, and a long-lasting period of reconstruction, and also a much slower process of integration into European structures. Also, there is another historic point that is often overlooked when it comes to Western Balkans. The region did not benefit, as the rest of Europe, from the Industrial Revolution. You would say that was a long time ago, but I think this has also left its mark because the economies of the region didn't have the chance to basically develop through the private sector and through innovation. This came much later and under much more difficult circumstances. But still, I see lots of room for optimism. I think, although the region was not part of this industrial transition, it is now fully part of the digital revolution. If you travel around and see what's going on the ground, look at what all these startup and young companies are doing, it's really marvelous. You see that the digital economy is becoming an engine of job creation and also of exports, especially in some countries. Exports of digital services are now surpassing the exports of digital goods, which is, in my eyes, a very, very positive development. So from an investor's perspective, I think that the region is developing, that the economy is growing at a faster pace than the rest of Europe. Of course, there is lots of potential, there's lots of profit opportunities. The infrastructure is improving, and there is still available workforce. We have lots of young people who have a high entrepreneurial spirit and also are quite resilient. So having said that, I think that the trajectory of this development is not automatic. We have a big challenge in terms of EU integration. Back in 2003 at the Thessaloniki summit, the EU has promised actually to the Western Balkans countries full integration, but 20 years later, the progress has been actually very slow, and this is of course something that creates lots of uncertainties. So coming back to your question, I think that the Western Balkans is not simply replicating the story of CESEE, but it's entering another phase of it under different conditions globally and economically. I think that the fundamentals in the countries are improving, the quality of life is increasing, the infrastructure is much better than before, so we see a new investment frontier developing ahead of us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's close the first round of questions with the Vice President of the European Investment Bank Group, which is the financing arm of the EU, finances EU priorities, but it's not only about financing infrastructure, technologies in EU. The support of EIB is also to support European companies somehow outside, abroad. It's impossible not to mention the tensions and the global challenges now in the world. The tension in the Middle East, reactions in US, etc. So, Mr. Vice President, how do you see the impact of the wars, of the global happenings on the trade? What can we do in Europe to reduce this kind of vulnerability and support European companies?
Thank you, Zuzana, for your question. Thank you for inviting me. Maybe before I go to answer your question, let me say just in 3 sentences something about the European Investment Bank. The European Investment Bank is the bank belonging to the 27 member states. It's the largest multilateral development bank in the world. Many people don't know it, but also it's given this is given by the nature of its operation, because 90% of our business we are doing in the EU, only 10% outside the EU. So there, basically these 10% are where we are competing with institutions like the EBRD, or competing or collaborating sometimes, the World Bank, EBRD and others. So we are not this kind of multilateral development bank at the others, which are mainly concentrated at the external financing. We are financing a lot inside the EU. As I said in my speech, last year we reached a volume of business in terms of signatures of 100 billion euro, out of which 10% we did outside the EU. And the main instruments which we are doing, we have a AAA rating, so we try to pass on this very favorable terms of financing on to our customers. So we are providing basically loans, mainly loans with quite competitive low interest rates and long tenors, but we are also providing guarantees, venture capital, venture debt, etc. Now to your question, so obviously the crisis which we are now facing, but first we have to say that this is I don't know, we are not probably able to count all these many crises which we have been facing, let's say, since, I would say, since the great financial crisis, 2007, be it, I don't know, I will just Brexit and terrorism, and we can name it all, very, very difficult times for us, this, and with COVID, of course. And we reveal with each of these crises, how vulnerable we can be. This time we are learning not only the obvious things, dependency on oil and gas, which we knew already before, and there are many comparisons how it compares this crisis in Hormuz to what we had in the 70s, the two oil crises. Some people say that this impact is, even in terms of volumes, even bigger than what we had in the 70s, though the impact on the price so far has not been that big, at least in Czechia, when you compare it to in the purchasing power. Even today, the prices of oil are lower than we had in the year 2012. in purchasing power when you take out inflation. But then we are learning all the other things. I don't know how vulnerable we are on sulfur or on urea to produce some on nitrogen to produce some fertilizers, things which we were not aware of. So we are learning always something new. Obviously, this is not good news. The most difficult question is what to do about it. I would maybe start, and here I will speak on a, let's say, more personal note than the Vice President of the EIB. I think we should start by saying what I think we should not do. And we should not do things which we are exactly doing, or which we are seeing in many countries, having untargeted, fully fledged fiscal support to, people like me. I don't need to have find fiscal support through lowering excise duties on oil, on fuel, or price controls. I can afford even these higher prices. So I think and it doesn't. I don't mean that the consequences for some people are certainly hard, but only for those I think we should have the targeted measures. If you look at the survey which, let's say, Bruegel is producing, and there was a good article last week by Martin Wolf in the Financial Times, you will see the volumes and the number of untargeted measures which are there, and most of them are untargeted. They are like full scale. Provided to all people, especially in Europe. In some countries, and I think in his graph he took over the statistics which you can find in Bruegel Institute, which is in Brussels. In terms of GDP, the highest in Europe was in Spain and in Bulgaria. In Bulgaria is to me a bit surprising because they have a technocratic government just after the election, so I don't know why they would need this kind of measures for political reasons. But you see that these measures are costly, not targeted. So these are things which I think we should not do. But of course, it's more easy to say than to do. My feeling is a bit that after COVID, politics became very active. I mean, it was very active before, but now it's really very activistic. I think there is both demand from the voters for these measures, but I think there is unfortunately also a lot of supply by politicians, and I think we should be really careful about it because we should, I think, use our fiscal space, which is not very big, and you saw it in the figures as well, for crises which might be really hard later on. And we have many other challenges like climate adaptation, like defense, etc., etc. So this is my short story on personal basis, which I think we should not do. What we can do, of course, it's much more difficult. The European Central Bank is one of those who try to, as you said, and I tried to say also in my introduction, to support the supply. And I think my answer would be, in the most general way, that we should try to build diversified and flexible economies, because diversification is the only way how we can avoid this vulnerability, not fully. The concept of strategic autonomy, which we are having now in the EU and so often discuss, is an interesting one, but we should be aware as economists that autonomy has its costs as well. Probably the least affected country in the world by the Hormuz crisis is probably North Korea, because it's fully autark and fully autonomous. But this is not what we want. We got richer exactly of the specialization of the division of labor, which we had especially since the 1990s, and I think we should continue with that. But obviously, we have to be more flexible and more diversified. But obviously, in this very interconnected world, whenever something happens somewhere, some parts of the economy will be affected, and I think this is simply unavoidable. And already to say the fact that some of these things are unavoidable. This shock which we got through the war in Iran is simply negative terms of trade effect. Our economies will be simply poorer because our import prices went up much faster than our export prices. We cannot do anything about it. The price controls and fiscal measures will not change it. It's only a question of internal redistribution. And we simply should be brave enough to state these facts to the public. I do it as economist because I'm not a politician. Well, with all the respect to you, this is not the broad, and this is probably the enlightened public which already knows it. I don't know to tell it exactly to you, but I think this should be said more. On the other hand, obviously the effect is bad because it's not so bad in terms of the effects on trade, because if you look at the figures of trade, the immediate effect is actually not that bad. But what is bad that all these uncertainties have a negative impact on investment, especially in the corporate sector. And that's what we see. The firms under uncertainty bring down their investment, and this is something very, very harmful, of course, for the future economic development. So, as I said, we, with our instrument at EIB, tried, in general terms, support this, let's say, the supply side of the economy through infrastructure projects, through favorable financing to various even firms, etc. But let me, so that I don't sound, only kind of ultra-liberal here, let me also say that we are developing in the EIB an instrument which we call for the time being a trade and investment booster. And this is something which should, in this world of, I would say, not very fair competition, especially by some of our global partners, I don't want to name them, China and others, who are not exactly sticking to WTO rules and OECD export credit rules. So we are also developing a kind of instrument which we think should be fully in line with the OECD, but through some financial engineering, we are able to make the financing of our exports and of our investments cheaper. Let me not go into the detail of this product because it's still being developed. In the moment when we have it ready, I am more than happy to come back to Vienna, to wherever you will invite me and to speak more about it. But exactly in order to compete with these a bit unfair trade practices of our major big rivals, especially China, we simply have to move in this direction as well if we want it or not. We should not be so naive to only look at it and to look at our, let's say, treasures in Africa falling down, whereas the Chinese are only gaining. We should try to do something about it. How successful we will be with that, let's see, but at least it's the aim of direction which we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the investments, the support, etc. Let's go back to the artificial intelligence. And Mr. Poleto, a question for you, because you see it from the banking perspective, investments, like which country is currently somehow the most advanced in AI usage, but also investments. We saw some figures from the EIB survey, but how is the experience really from the ground? How is it in general, but also how is it in your bank? Is investment in AI dominated by large firms, large companies, or startups, or consultant firms? How is the reality in this sector?
Well, it depends. So the model area is totally dominated by the American player. There is no competition there. So the model itself are basically ahead of everyone else. The Chinese are interesting, but they pose some risk in terms of strategy. So probably we have experienced some of them, but with download those. China has this strategy of open source models. So this is the way they go. So this gives us the chance to download that model running on our machine by limiting the risk of data leakage or data connection to China. But in general, the model are dominated by the US company. And the answer is very simple. The model itself is nothing spectacular. You could replicate the large language model even in smaller places, right? The key is the compute power you need to run those models at scale. And only US company had the power. And most of them, to be frank, I'm not ruling out that Anthropic and OpenAI are currently running under cost. So what they charge us for token right now, I'm not sure they're making lots of money on. But they have this long strategy. And if you think about it, how many of you knew that I'm sure all of you are enjoying Amazon one-day delivery, right? How many of you knows that Amazon Prime, which is guaranteed one, was a money-losing exercise for about 6 years in Amazon. They were losing about $2 billion a year. But they could handle it for a prolonged period of time until they figure out the consumer got used to it and expect the same thing from all the other companies around. So they kill the competition with that model, right? And I think with AI, it's happening something a bit similar. So they are going on the coast right now on the token. So on the model level is those American model. On the execution, it's exactly the opposite. I get the same quality of agentic workflow from a single engineer than from the biggest consulting company you may see around. So I get the same result. A single engineers can deliver you an agentic workflow, probably on the level as, I don't know, a large global consulting company with teams in 20 different locations. We saw in Austria what happened with this single engineer that create open cloud at turn of the year. Remember, from December to February, the whole internet was talking about open cloud. This was one guy. Actually, there were two guys. It's just that he took the front office. There was another Viennese guy that did the background. But beside that, two guys. So you see, this is a beautiful transformation we see right now. On one side, we have this global model that give you access very quickly to those technology that at the moment they're leading there, absolutely. On the other side, even a single engineer can build something that can change your world, can change your company, can change your process, can change your supply chain, can change your way of doing stuff radically. You see the extreme, it's incredible, right? And I think that's what I see right now. In terms of country, we see enthusiasm all around. Well, we're having about 2.5 million customer in Czech Republic, retail user in Czech Republic that are currently using our AI model, let's say our AI conversation generated by AI model. We picked Czech Republic not because the market is particularly ahead of other markets, for a simple pragmatic reason. We had a team in Czech Republic that was a bit ahead of the rest of the group, so we said, let's pull this off with that team. They were early into chatbot, early into IBM Watson, machine learning, and so on and so on. We started there, but this was just a very early advantage. Now, in all the other countries, we have experiment with voice. Actually, no, more than experiment. I think we are in production with voice model in Slovakia. They start building it in Hungary and in Austria. So more or less, let's say from the output point of view, we are a bit ahead in Czech Republic, but not particularly because this is a special market, simply because we decided to start with that market. And yeah, and for the rest, at the end of the day, we value impact of our innovation based on how our customer picking it up. That we don't see difference. We see customer in Austria, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania. We see pretty much the same attitude. We see early adapters want to try this new thing. They're willing to get a conversation with the machine. But when we talk about early adapter, don't get too excited. We're talking about 15 to 20% of the mass market. 20% is really the peak. The other, when we launch a feature with AI, they like it, and then they forget about it. They go on doing what they've done the last 20 years. And it takes time to get there. I'd like to remind you, think about yourself, how long it was your transition to put your plastic debit card into a machine, put it in, to tap into the machine. It took you years to get that shift. And if you now go to the supermarket, and I do every week, you see that few people are tapping their phone, and few people are still tapping their plastic. So we are on that level. So mass market innovation takes, normally I say it takes generation. Generation is 15 to 20 years. Maybe here is a bit faster, but in general, it's not something that happens quarter by quarter. It's happening year by year. Our job is to make sure that we develop through the speed properly. Because, we are in the trust business. People need to trust our solutions. So we need to make sure we are playing with those timing correctly. That's my view.
Thank you. Mr. Prepiak, we heard already about China. You already mentioned Volvo with 78% of, Chinese involvement. So automotive, important for the CEE region. How is the region somehow impacted by Chinese competition? What is the role of Chinese supplier? What is the perspective of your industry about this?
Thank you. Maybe I will introduce some figures for you to better understand the background of the car industry. I try to now compare the 2 years, year 2019, just before the COVID, with some figures in the 2024, 2025. 2019, we were able to find customer and sell in European Union 15 million cars per year. This includes European Union plus UK. Okay, UK left the European Union in 20s, but altogether 15 million cars. We were able to produce more than 16 million cars in Europe. That was 21% of the global production of passenger cars. What's happened in the 2024-2025? That's our figures from ASEA, and we are the member of ASEA, therefore we are always sharing some background and feeling. Selling new cars fall down by 13 millions. That means every year we lost 2 million customers. Productions, it's going down, and now we are overcapacity with more than 2 million cars produced in Europe without any production. We have now share in the world only in the 15% of the passenger car production. That's everything happened in the 5 years. What's happened in the fleet? 270 million cars in the 2019s, average age of vehicles 10.8. Now, slightly more, 280,000, but the average 12.5. Something happened with our customers. We don't know what, but something happened. We are losing customers. Now we have, let's call it, empty production capacity. And we will see if this empty production capacity, because automotive industry is very close to the machinery, still it's very close to the machinery production, we will be turned to the different production things, as I mentioned in my first part, maybe the production of the defense industry, or we will offer this production capacity to the China. Because as you know, the European Union is now trying to set up the rules, what means the European product, how should be the share of the European produced, let's say, part of the cars and so and so. Slovakia, in the last years, made a, let's say, open door for the 2 Chinese investors. One is, as I mentioned, the assembly plant for Volvo Group, which is almost close to 80% owned by Chinese company Geely, and as well as we start to build on the greenfield the gigafactory for the battery. It means we try to be always in the, let's say, basket of supplying and possible, let's say, producing the final product for the automotive industry. That is our, let's say, target as a country, and we try to do all the best to focus on this opportunity. How the Chinese will decide it? We have, let's say, discussion last year, but the final investment finished in the southwestern Europe. That means not in Slovakia, but there is a lot of other things behind, like a current current, let's say, deficit in the state budget and many other not appropriately good decision for the economy. Mr. Klimek, which is used to be first state secretary in the Ministry of Finance sitting here, they can tell you a lot of story behind the economic, let's say, conditions. We try to, let's say, catch up this capacity and offer everything to be always in the, let's say, basket in the group of the automotive industry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dobruna, we heard different perspectives from different sectors. Let's go back to the region which is important for Europe. Let's go back to EU candidate countries. You helped many foreign investors to enter a country like Kosovo. So how is the landscape of foreign investors evolving in this region, in Western Balkans, in Kosovo? What role do the European companies play today, if they play any, compared to other global investors in the region?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that the region is important for the European Union, because we know it also from the historic perspective that it is quite an important region to consider nowadays, also in terms of investment. Of course, political uncertainty and a high risk profile kept investors away for years, and also the growth model driven by foreign direct investment came relatively late. So we are kind of late entrants into this growth model. But what we're observing now is a shift towards more interest, more investment, especially I think driven by EU integration prospects, although very slow, and also by some nearshoring initiatives. So there is a continuous stream of inflows of FDIs, which is hovering at around 5 to 6% in average across the region, and which is, I would say, quite significant, but also in terms of the structure, because volume is not always a good measure. In terms of the structure, we see more investments coming in new sectors, like in the digital sector, and also in renewable energies, which is for many reasons positive, but particularly because the region is more or less heading towards the same direction as the European Union, digitally and environmentally, I would say. At the same time, we are seeing an increased interest in manufacturing, especially in defense, but also in more strategic sectors like manufacturing of pharmaceutical goods. We are currently working with a project that plans to manufacture raw materials for vitamin production in Kosovo, and to supply manufacturers across Europe. This project seems to be very attractive and interesting, because it has also attracted the attention of the European Commission, which is now analyzing ways how to support and de-risk the project. So in general, I think there is a shift from cost-based investment or location towards a more strategic location, which is also playing or will play an important role in strengthening the resilience of supply chains in Europe. At the same time, of course, the investment environment is becoming more complex, not only in geopolitical terms, but also in terms of disruption through AI and different developments. Still, we have investment incoming. We have lots of European companies that are active there. We saw Austria is one of the top investors there, Germany as well. And we have some recent increasing interest from the Scandinavian countries, which probably are trying to diversify now because of the developments in that have started with the aggression on Ukraine. So overall, I think the region remains very attractive, but the way ahead depends on a number of factors, especially on stability, be it internal or global, on on an hopefully accelerated EU integration process, and also on the ability of these economies to more or less adapt to the needs of value chains across Europe.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, it's clear that the world is these days much more fragmented than years ago, or even one year ago. It's having clear implications on the companies, especially also on the companies in the region. We heard two sectors who are affected. Companies who are somehow export-oriented are really having implications. Can we renew somehow this multilateral system we were used to in the past, or is the world and EU, Europe, really moving towards more fragmented architecture, which is going to be built around somehow plurilateral agreements?
Well, again, a very difficult question. What I think is obvious, especially if we speak about countries in Central, Eastern and Southeastern Europe, is that these kind of countries obviously benefited from the previous order, which was a rules-based order, settled in institutions, and now we can name it differently. It could be called the EU as an institution, not only for the EU members, but also for the neighborhood. It could be the NATO, not only for the NATO members, but also for the neighborhood, including the Austrians. Sorry. It could be the WTO. So we all benefited from these things, especially the small open economies whose share of trade and GDP is much higher than the bigger ones. For them, it's even more important. And because they also cannot play on their own so much, their power is simply limited. So the more they are embedded in a kind of a rules-based system, and you can name it, many of them, the World Bank, the IMF also created certain framework conditions. But what we are seeing now is something which I still cannot explain to myself. And let's see, because I think we will need a distance, I don't know, of 10, 20, maybe 50 years to understand what's going on now. For me, it's not understandable that we are seeing this rupture within this, what I would call the global West, especially the transatlantic relationship, that it was not something which was enforced by the Chinese or by the Russians, etc. We simply did, on one side of this transatlantic relationship, decided not to be friends anymore. And this is very difficult to understand, at least for me, because I would say even from the point of the Americans, with all the respect to the US Americans, I still would think that for them, I think if I was a US American, that still the closest ally geopolitically still would be Europe. But obviously not everyone shares this view in the United States, and we are seeing this rupture, which is very unfortunate, for me not very well understood. What will happen now? And by the way, this system which we had before, it was not only very profitable for the countries like Central Eastern European countries, it was also very profitable for the developing countries. 1 billion people grew out of poverty, especially in Southeast Asia, especially in China, but also in Africa and elsewhere. So, but I would say, but sorry, again, it's on a strictly personal basis. I think even the Americans actually profited from the previous global order. I don't see, if you look at the numbers, they are still richer than us. They are growing faster than us. So I simply don't see the point. Okay, I will stop here. It's simply something which I don't understand. What will happen then? I don't know. I still think that, unlike many of my colleagues and my friends think, I think it's still partly revertible, at least partly. I can imagine that there will be a new American leadership which will be more European-friendly, as we had it for so many years since the Second World War. It will probably never be the same as it was before, but I don't think that the Americans will for long have any interest in having this brutal rupture in this transatlantic relationship. But let's see. What we can do, whatever happens there, of course, we should try to be more independent. I think our strategies should be as I said, well, maybe concentrate a bit more on this, what we call strategic autonomy, but I think there are limits on it, and I said too much autonomy also has its costs. We should concentrate in terms of, let's say, trade relationship on having these regional or country-oriented trade agreements, which we are now having with, I think, 46 countries. We now recently had one with Mercosur. We are to adopt one with India, with some other countries. So this is a policy which we should follow. Of course, if we had the WTO globally, it would be much better. But and there, it's not only the question of the United States, but there is, for me, the bigger challenger before was obviously China. If we don't have these WTO rules, then we should, as I said, rely on these bilateral agreements. And then we should still try to somehow keep our relationship with the United States. And there you see, because it's difficult to understand what's going on, but one of the more interesting things, and I don't know if you have noticed, is that, for instance, recently the EU Commissioner for Trade, Maroš Šefčovič, signed 2 important deals on critical raw materials with the United States. So there are things on which, at least, let's say, nominally, I don't know how much real will something happen after on these critical raw materials, but at least the signature of 2 deals on this critical area, which is critical raw materials, happened. So there are still links somewhere on which, hopefully, in future we can build on. So to answer your question, sorry to be so unclear, but I really don't know what will happen. What will happen next? We should try to make ourselves as stronger as we can. But at the same time, I would simply advise, I would strongly advise not to give up completely on the transatlantic relationship.
Thank you. Mr. Poleto, back to you and AI. You mentioned like US companies or, US model as the key one, also within your company. From your perspective, what has been or is the key enabler to scale somehow AI across Erste Group? Can you compare the different approaches also within your companies in different countries? Because you have, Erste is operating in the region in different countries. What are the biggest bottlenecks, these days? Is it talent? Is it the relationship with the US these days? Is it the data? How is it in the countries Erste operates from your perspective?
First, there is no difference. The challenges so we are a large organization. We have about 55,000 employees, approximately across 8 countries. With Poland as our new acquisition, the group really take over Central Eastern Europe completely. So the challenge in such an organization are cultural challenge everywhere. So there are cultural challenge, regulatory challenge, and process challenges. Let me elaborate on each of them. So culturally, the biggest challenge in AI is the fact that AI allows individual people to be highly productive. All of you can replace an office tomorrow. The problem is most of you are used to have an office. And I'm not sure all of you are willing to be his own office alone. Because we are used to, every time we are used to set up projects, invite people to our office and set up the team and look for a budget and make this budget approved. And that kind of project approach that many large organizations are using are also approaches that are distributing the risk and responsibility of those projects to multiple people. You do something, I do something, and you do something. Now, with AI, you could potentially do everything yourself together with an AI tool, but then you're in charge. If something happens, you're the only one responsible. And so that's one of the cultural challenges, my job is to provide the tool to our employees. That's only one part of the point. The other part is that those individual people can do something they have done with a team, start doing it by themselves, which doesn't mean getting rid of all the other people. It means that being able to have a bigger output. I think one of the issue, not the only one, we have in Europe over the current course of many years is the productivity challenge. The amount of output you get on individuals, so the productivity challenge, it's something we will need to improve. And AI will help, but you need to be ready to jump into the new world. So culturally, first part is, it's very much entrepreneurial if you think about it. But if you're in a big company, probably you're part of a complex structure. So culturally, that's the challenge. Regulatory-wise, I mean, this is also a challenge. I don't want to repeat again everything you heard left and right. In Europe, we tend to regulate. In the US, they try to innovate. And there is a space in between. And I don't believe in do whatever you want. I don't believe in that thing. I think the European approach is much more meaningful that, okay, let's rip it off and see where we get. Like, fake it as long as you are successful, bit US style, right? So I believe that there is a European way, but we need to make sure this is not getting to the extreme to say you cannot do anything. Everything is problematic, right? And so there we are now in the process of implementing the EU Act and the combination of the AI Act with all the other regulation around it, because they're all interconnected. When it's digital, they're all interconnected. That becomes really complex to handle. That's something we need to master our governance capacity very much. The third process I would like to stress with you is the following. I don't know how many of you has experiment with AI, but one thing you will learn when you experiment with generative AI is that the output of generative AI is not deterministic. And we are building software. My job is to build software, mainly in banking software. We build deterministic software. What we have done the last 25 years is build deterministic software, which means I write a piece of software, I test it for years, and I know exactly the output. I know exactly what it is. And when I'm sure the output is something I like, I release into the market. With AI, it doesn't work like this. With AI, you have no idea what's going to be the output. You can control it a bit, but you need to change the process. So you need to change. There is no moment where you say, now I'm confident, it just give me the same result over and over and again, so I put it out. It works like you put it out, and you need to have people who monitor it in real time, which pose challenge in terms of privacy, which pose challenge in terms of way of working, capacity and skill of people who will do the constant challenging. So if it's in the past, I give you an example with legal, for instance. If in the past my legal colleagues or my compliance colleagues were looking at my software a month before release into production, they were doing their test, they were giving green lights, I signed the paper, and then I was releasing. They're out of the game. They jump into the next project. With the AI approach, AI advisory, AI answering, you need to have, most probably the solution will be in the future, a legal agent, which is programmed by my legal colleague and probably not them themselves, who regularly check the output, constantly, all the time. This is ongoing things. And so, as you can imagine, this is a major challenge. It's just a different way of working we have done the last years. And it requires every piece of the organization that are being involved in outputting AI processes to work in a slightly different way. And I think this is the third challenge I would like to highlight. Then, of course, there are many others, but I don't want to bother you. We're getting too technical. However, the opportunity is so gigantic that it's totally worth the effort to go through all those challenges. It's really impressive. And I've been very negative in other technology, like in blockchain in the past, even though I like blockchain itself, but there was too much dust and there was too much overselling. With AI, I think, I see incredible stuff and incredible speed, and it's very exciting to be in this space.
Thank you. Mr. Prepiak, let's speak about automotive again. We heard about the productivity challenges, the new technologies, etc. I would say same applies for automotive, but how is it these days? Because there was this, or there is the automotive package from the end of last year, where more or less very briefly, like EU revised de facto the ban of combustion engines. And it means that after 2035, we can still go forward with combustion and not to be fully electric. Okay, very simplified. But when we hear all this here, isn't it a somehow mistake of EU to step back a bit? Because we might, decelerate our transition towards the electric vehicles, towards what the China is now, hugely producing. What is your opinion? What is the view of the automotive? Because in Slovakia, there are many discussions, and there were in the past. I think the voices were definitely for allowing combustion also further. So, what is your perspective?
Thank you. Again, simple question, not so easy answer. But maybe at the beginning, Mr. Poletto, let's say something which I'm starting a little bit thinking about it. It's a transition period, and you mentioned that transition period usually need one generation. Fully agreed with you. Maybe now the question, what means the generation? When I was, let's say, married, I got the first child in 25. Now the first child came in 35. That means now the generation is 35 years, according to my, let's say, assumption. But really, this is something I don't want to judge the European Union if that is good or not, if we are made a step back and so. At the beginning, when started this discussion about, let's say, a reduction of CO2 and emission, let's say global one, we made a lot of, let's say, analysis, discussion. Is a good way? Is another speedy too much, and so and so. I don't want to judge these things. Final goal is that really the European Union a little bit make the review of the 2035. But needless to say, the second one, this is nothing that we allow, let's say, registration of combustion engine after the 35, because the compensation is something which you put small thing on the desk, and the compensation is, let's say, call it like unrealistic, yeah. Only the compensation for the CO2 emission when we produce the steel or any kind of metal means that the car will be, I don't want to say like how much, but they will be significantly more expensive than the current one, because we will spend a lot of money for the things. So, but let's back to this generation, and this, let's say, I started thinking about the generation needs. What now the new generation needs? We know that for example, driving license, when I was 18, okay, it's a little bit long time ago, but to young men without driving license was either we had one.
No man.
Exactly, no man, yeah, that's it. Either they have no leg or they was blind or something like that. Now, half of the young generation, they don't need a driving license. There is using transport, and when I'm little bit back to the passenger car, it's something like a private mobility. They change the opinion, and private mobility for them means cell phone, and in the €5 called Uber, Bolt, any kind of, let's say, this kind of providers. So that means why to be binded with some asset? Asset, car means asset. You see what's happened with the prices. 5-7 years ago, I was in the panelist and say like, people don't forget for cars which will be around 10,000 to 12,000 euros. I was heading and everything. You don't understand what it means. If the car will be produced massively and so the price will be completely down. What we see now, the 25 to 30,000 is a small cars. 30,000 K is a small cars. 5-7 years ago, it was 10, maybe 12,000 euros. So that means the price is increasing, additional cost is increasing, now the environmental taxes, consumption taxes, ETFs, and a lot of other things. That means the fixed cost, which is related to the ownership of cars, it's so huge that the young generation say like, I don't need a car. I need to find solution for my mobility. We are turning back to the young generation. That means this is the drivers of the, let's say, technology needs, artificial intelligence, and many others. Do they still live somewhere when are really depend on the car? No. They're living in the center of cities. They have a great public traffic. Sometimes they use the bike, if there is sunshine like that. The standard speed of the road, I was a little bit surprised. Last 10 minutes I was driving not more than 30 kilometers per hour in Vienna. 30 kilometers drive. I was twice, let's say, bypassing by bicycles. When I was start my first drive of the car, the speed of the city was 60, and after the 11 o'clock, 90. In the evening, we were able to drive through the cities in 90s, without ABS, without nothing. Yeah. Now 30 with a car which is fully equipped with a lot of things which break you immediately, which you turn your steering wheel, everything. Yeah. So that means the young generation will set up and will create the mirror. How they see the, let's say, mobility for themselves, and we have to react. I am, let's say, fan of the new technologies, but only the technologies which help me. I don't like the technologies which always is, let's say, beeping to me, you are over speed 1 kilometers per hour, reduce the speed, and behind you have an additional 10 cars, and you couldn't brake because they will be immediately, but like, what are you doing? Yeah. But the new generation really use the car as a product to move from the one point to the second one. Therefore, I see, let's say, I want to say bright future, but something which Europe can do it, especially now in Vienna, with 30 kilometers maximum speed limit, is the autonomous cars. Autonomous cars. If you, let's say, use your Bolt or any other providers, the car can come without driver. Now the technology is, it's really, let's say, well equipped, and this territory, which is speed so slow, I see there is no dangers for anybody, neither the pedestrian, neither for bikers, nobody. That's my, let's say, observation, like, how to transfer. Maybe my first part, which was slightly negative, like how we decrease, and so a little bit more positive, that maybe this is something which from the destruction or disruption of the, all this automotive industry will create a new possibility soon. And I believe that the Europe, especially concentrate with a young generation to the megacities, can create a good background and can create the conditions to use this kind of artificial or, let's say, intelligent or new technology to the car industry.
Great to have the light in the tunnel in front of us. Thanks so much. I have so many questions still. I'm a curious lady, but I would like to give the floor to you, to our distinguished guests and to our audience. So please feel free if there are any questions. Just, stand up, introduce yourself and ask our panelists. If we have also maybe some questions online, if there is anybody to read them, we would be happy to ask our panelists as well.
Thanks, Robert Sterrer from Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. Two very short questions, one on AI and one on trade. I start with the trade one, meaning the success of the Central European economies in the 2000s, up to 2010-15, I think was a combination of various factors, particularly there was an export market like China and US, which were quite expanding, together with the integration into value chains and the German export miracle in a sense, right? So I wonder now, because these two big markets, China and US, is exactly those markets who are vanishing, who or where would be the potential of exports for the European Union countries, particularly for the Western Balkan countries, to have a similar experience? Also refer to Matteo's presentation, he focused on the import side, but where would be the export side coming from as the big markets like China and US are fading out, it seems to me. Second question on AI. We know this famous quote by Bob Soloff, we see computers everywhere, but not in the productivity statistics. Question to... Well, Bob Soloff, you see computers everywhere, but not in the productivity statistics. So when we poor economists, you think, will see the AI revolution in the labor productivity and growth statistics takes another generation? Thanks.
So who wants to start?
Who was the first question?
I think in general, so who wants to take it?
Well, if I may just say, I'm not an expert on trade, but in terms of the Western Balkan, I think, and try to keep this very short, I think the most natural trade partner is and will be the European Union, including countries of the region and Turkey.
Thank you. We have the question here.
Maybe I add a little bit small remark, maybe from the different angle for your first question related a little bit to the market. I used to work for many different car companies, from Japan to Europe up to the United States. Therefore, I see, let's say, how they treat the local domestic market. And what I'm missing now is that Europe is not focused on your own local market. We are, let's say, we are blinding. Sometimes the politicians are, or better say, car industry is something like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. When we are producing the car, when we are paying the taxes, when we are employing the people, we are good boy, we are Dr. Jekyll. But once we want to sell the product, the car is, sorry to say, it's a political enemy. There is politicians which don't want to see the car on the road. They want to use the public transport, they want to use the bicycle. Why the people are using the car is the disaster. Now that everybody is applying the additional taxes. So that means it's something which I, let's say, my personally, I couldn't read, I couldn't understand, yeah? But I used to work, as I mentioned, for Japanese company, and primary, all Japanese company are always focused on the local domestic market. If they are good enough, if the products are good enough, if they have saturation on the market, then they are looking for the export. Europe is something, for me, out of understanding. We are crying that the United States will apply additional, I don't know, 20 or 25% of import duty, and maybe we will lose from the 800,000 cars per year, which is export from Europe to United States, half of them, which is 0.4 million cars. But nobody is crying what's happened with 2 million customers in Europe, where they are. So that means this is something which maybe I indirectly answer a little bit for your question. Europe, according to my personal understanding, has to focus to our European market. Has to focus on our European market. Doesn't matter what kind of product, but please try to focus and try to find the customers on our market. Thank you.
I think this was a nice closure of the panel, because we still have one part of today's afternoon in front of us, social networking. So let's use it as an opportunity to ask the questions which were not possible to be raised here. I would like to thank you very much to our distinguished panelists, Mr. Květin Dobruna, Mr. Marek Mora, Maurizio Poleto, and Pavel Prepia. Big applause. And thank you very much for joining us for the discussion.
And let me also thank Susanna Kaparova for the very nice and lively panel discussion and the diverse views that were presented. On behalf of the Austrian National Bank, I would like to thank you all for your interest, for being here. I think there is now much more time and opportunity to raise bilaterally questions outside. We have prepared some snacks. And thanks also to our cooperation partner, European Investment Bank. It's always a pleasure to cooperate with you, and I hope we will continue this in the future. Thank you.